On yesterday's podcast, we released the consensus top 10 most important players to the future of the Buffalo Bills. Today, we go deeper and highlight major discrepancies among the panel today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino, author of Go Bills and Buffalo's Run, also the co-host of the Locked On NFL Scouting podcast, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, and a big welcome to our everydayers. You know who you are. Those of you who never miss a single episode, I appreciate y'all being here very, very much. I'd also like to invite you to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Well, welcome to part 2 of our series on ranking the most important players to the future of the Buffalo Bills. As a reminder, in case somehow you missed yesterday and found yourself here today, I asked each member of this panel to provide me with a list of their 10 most important players to the future of the Buffalo Bills. And in doing so, I asked them to look at this through the lens of if this player reaches their ceiling and or maintains their current level of play for a number of continued years, how will that impact the success of the team? Also, in doing so, I asked them to consider how important the role is that they fill for the team. And if that player can't be the answer, how difficult would it be to find that answer? And so I had 11 people on this panel, myself and 10 other Buffalo Bills podcasters and content creators, and I averaged together all 11 sets of rankings to develop the consensus list of the top 10 most important players to the future of the Buffalo Bills. So yesterday on the podcast, we unveiled the consensus top 10 list, and today I'm going to give you the full list that spans 18 different players. And of course, I'm going to invite the panel back today for a follow-up question regarding either something unique about their individual rankings or a general question on the results of the project. As a reminder, here is the panel in alphabetical order by first name. We have Anthony Marino, the host of the Breaking Buffalo Rumblings podcast. Anthony Prohaska, host of the Cover One Film Room and Disguise coverage on Cover One. Bruce Nolan, the host of the Bruce exclusive podcast on Buffalo Rumblings. Greg Tompsett, the host of the Cover One Buffalo podcast and the Greg Tompsett Sports Show. Joe Miller, the host of the Overreaction Sports podcast on Buffalo Rumblings. Nate Geary of WGR 550. Pat Moran, host of Talking Buffalo. Ryan Talbot, writer for Syracuse.com and co-host of the Shout Buffalo Football podcast. Sterling Furrow, host of the Intentional Grounding podcast on Buffalo Rumblings. And of course, Zebot, YouTube host and content creator for Buffalo Fanatics. And so here is the full list. This includes every player that was ranked by a member of the panel in order of average rank. So as you know, yesterday, number 1, Josh Allen. Number 2, Stefon Diggs. Number 3, Matt Milano, the big jump for him. Dion Dawkins at number 4. At number 5 is Gregory Rousseau. Number 6, Von Miller. Number 7, Tre'Davious White. Number 8, Dalton Kincaid. Number 9, Spencer Brown. And number 10, Kyer Elam. Now here's the guys outside of the top 10 that also received votes, but their average just wasn't high enough to crack the top 10. Number 11, we had James Cook, the running back. Number 12, Osiris Torrence, the Bills' second-round pick, the guard out of Florida. Number 13, Dawson Knox. Number 14, safety Micah Hyde. Number 15, defensive tackle Daquon Jones. Number 16, Ed Oliver. Number 17, Jordan Poyer. And at number 18, the last player to receive a vote, Tyler Bass, the kicker. And so Let that sink in. Again, I'll give you 11 through 18 again. James Cook, Osiris Torrence, Dawson Knox, Micah Hyde, Daquon Jones, Ed Oliver, Jordan Poyer, Tyler Bass. So no votes for Gabriel Davis. No votes for Mitch Morse. No votes for Taron Johnson. And so if any of that surprised you, the follow-up questions for the panel members responsible are coming up next. But first, I need to tell you about Built Bar. Built Bar is the most delicious protein bar on the planet. These things taste awesome and they're healthy. They're tasty because, well, they're covered in 100% real chocolate and they come in great flavors. They have peanut butter puff. They've got cookies and cream. They've got coconut almond, brownie batter. They got so many great flavors and they're all covered in 100% real chocolate. It's like eating a candy bar, but they're good for you. Like I said, they're low calorie, they're low sugar, high in protein. These things are awesome. Not sure how Built was able to thread that needle between healthy and delicious, but they certainly did. Folks, you got to try them out. Head on over to Built.com. Use our promo code LOCKEDON15. It'll get you 15% off your next order, or you can grab a box off the shelf at your local Walmart or Sam's Club. So check them out. You'll thank us later. All right, folks, it's now time for those follow-up questions for the panel. And real quick, before we get into that, tomorrow on the podcast, I'm really going to dive into my specific comments, takeaways, thoughts from this project. I was one of the 11 panel members, so I want to give you my specific ballot, compare it to where everything else settled when everything was averaged together, and just give you some of my key takeaways from the project. So that's coming your way tomorrow. So you have that to look forward to. But for now, let's get these follow-up questions in for the panel. And first up is Greg Tompsett. Now, this year's top 10 includes significant turnover with 4 new names, meaning 4 names are out. Entering the mix is Matt Milano, Dalton Kincaid, Spencer Brown, and Kyer Elam. Leaving are Dawson Knox, Ed Oliver, Gabriel Davis, and Tremaine Edmonds. So, Greg, what are your thoughts? What are your prevailing thoughts when considering the differences in this year's list compared to last year's list?
Good evening. This is Greg Tompsett from the Cover One Buffalo podcast, and I appreciate Joe having me on today to be able to talk about the turnover that we saw in the consensus top 10 to the future of the Buffalo Bills. Because obviously I spent a lot of time talking about contracts and the CBA and how the salary cap impacts teams, and it's a direct impact on what we've seen in the turnover in this consensus top 10. As you see players like Dawson Knox, Ed Oliver, Gabriel Davis, and Tremaine Edmonds leave the top 10, it's because of the contract status. It's because of wondering whether we're going to retain Ed Oliver, whether we're going to retain Gabriel Davis, the fact that we lost Tremaine Edmonds, and then obviously bringing in the new players. Dalton Kincaid steps into that top 10. You have Matt Milano, Spencer Brown, Kyer Elam, having those kind of where there's more long-term certainty to their contract. There's more upside in what their capabilities are and what their impact can be over the long term for this team. That's going to be the exact kind of exercise that Brandon Beane and his staff is going through as they talk about who's important to the future of their team. So I think it's great that our panel that Joe pulled together here had the same kind of mindset, that taking into account contract structure, longevity, and the ability to retain talent is just as important as identifying that talent and identifying the players that are capable of making an impact on the Buffalo Bills' future. So I think that you look at players, Matt Milano reaches that extension. We just drafted Dalton Kincaid and have him for his 4-year rookie deal plus a 5th-year option. You have Spencer Brown still with multiple years left on his rookie deal, and Kyer Elam just stepping into the 2nd year with his 4-year rookie deal and 5th-year option. It's that kind of contract certainty and that upside that impacts their ability to be a part of the future of the Buffalo Bills. So I appreciate the fact that the panel picked that out. I agree with it wholeheartedly. I had all 4 of these players in my consensus top 10 as well, along with the group. So I think it was a great question by Joe, and I think that it really speaks to the fact that all of us have that mindset, that the contract status and the ability to maintain that talent on the roster is just as important as picking out the talent itself. So again, you can find me anywhere that you can find podcasts where you're enjoying this wonderful Locked On Bills episode as well. You can find Cover One on YouTube and find me on Twitter at Greg Tompsett. Appreciate Joe for having me on, and we'll talk to you guys soon. Thanks.
Next up, we have Nate Geary. And Nate, one of the most notable changes from this year's list compared to last year is the complete shift when it comes to Gabriel Davis. Now, Gabe was number 7 on our list in 2022, but not a single member of the panel gave him a vote to be in the top 10. So, Nate, break it down. What do you make of this?
Hey guys, Nate Geary here from Bills pre, half, and post game on WGR Sports Radio 550. Back and talking about our biggest year-over-year mover on the consensus top 10 players to the future of the Buffalo Bills, Gabriel Davis. Davis was the number 7 player on our list last year and had exactly 0 votes from our team this year, which is a pretty stunning fall from grace when you consider how most Bills fans felt about him after that Kansas City playoff game in 2021. I think there's a few reasons for this meteoric fall from grace. The first one is his future contract uncertainty. The Bills dedicated a lot of cap space to Stefon Diggs and Dawson Knox going into last offseason. Diggs' cap number is set at a modest $14 million for the 2023 season, but balloons to almost $28 million in 2024. The season, of course, that Davis is expected to become an unrestricted free agent. Like Diggs, Knox's 2023 cap number sits at a very modest $6.4 million, but goes to over $14 million in 2024, meaning the Bills have about $42 million locked up next season in pass catchers, not named. Not considering all the other pieces, Deontay Hardy, he could be back as well. They have Trent Sherfield on a 1-year contract. So that doesn't also account for some of the other pieces that they have at the wide receiver and pass catching position without any sort of restructuring. So when you consider that mediocre receivers over the last couple of seasons have been getting on the open market, it's not too far-fetched to believe Davis might command a contract north of $15 million per year next year, which I think puts him out of range for a contract extension from the Buffalo Bills. With that contract uncertainty, I think you're seeing our voters contemplate his place on the roster after 2023. Another big reason for Davis's drop is likely due to the unfair expectations that were placed on him after his career playoff performance in 2021. His 8 catches for 201 yards and 4 touchdowns had Bills Mafia and the fantasy football community at large salivating at the idea of what he could be in 2022. But Davis failed to meet those lofty expectations, having the worst drop rate in the league last season and struggling at times with any level of consistency. Now, you can blame the ankle injury he sustained early in the year, but overall, this was a player that really struggled with catching the football, which is obviously one of the main sort of job descriptions of a wide receiver. Davis has a bright future, but I worry if that future is here in Buffalo.
Next up, we're going to hear from Ryan Talbot. And for Ryan, Dawson Knox is entering the first year of a 4-year extension that pays him an annual average salary of $14 million a season. He was number 9 in this list last year, but he didn't make this year's top 10. Ryan was actually among 3 panel members that did include him on his ballot, and he was the highest with him at number 7. So, Ryan, why do you think Dawson Knox should have made this year's top 10?
I'm Ryan Talbot, co-host of Shout, the Buffalo Football Podcast, and Bills reporter for Syracuse.com and NYUp.com, here to discuss Dawson Knox's omission from the top 10 consensus players to the future of the Buffalo Bills. I had Knox at number 7 on my list and feel he was a worthy candidate to make it again this year, despite the team drafting Dalton Kincaid in the first round of the 2023 NFL Draft. With Kincaid in the fold, I feel like the Bills have that 1-2 punch at tight end that they've been looking for. Not just last year with Ken Dorsey, but even the past few seasons with Brian Daboll before that as offensive coordinator. Knox has already been an integral part of the passing game, catching about 50 passes or close to 50 passes the past 2 seasons, while notching 15 total touchdowns over the 2021 and 2022 season. Now with Kincaid in the mix, the Bills should be able to run some more 12 personnel, which will give Knox even more opportunities to get the ball in his hands. In addition to being a terrific weapon for Josh Allen, Dawson Knox is a terrific blocking option for the Bills, an area where he's made strong improvements from his rookie season up until now. I don't believe the Bills will ever truly be a run-first offense as long as Josh Allen is in his prime, but the team did make some noteworthy additions via free agency in the draft this year, so I could see them trying to run the ball a bit more. And while those offensive linemen up front will have to open those first lanes for the running backs, Knox downfield could be the reason why those backs end up with 20-plus yard carries or even going the distance. So between his ability to block for the running backs, block for Josh Allen, and catch the ball, I felt that Dawson Knox was a worthy addition to this year's consensus top 10, despite him not making it. Again, I'm Ryan Talbot, co-host of Shout the Buffalo Football Podcast. You can find me on Twitter at Ryan Talbot Bills, and you can listen to Shout on all of the major podcast platforms.
All right, let's hear from Pat Moran. And my question for Pat Moran is this. Ed Oliver was number 6 in our consensus list in 2022. This year, not only did he fall out of the top 10 completely, but Pat was the only member of the panel to include him on his ballot. So, Pat, why did you slot him at number 7? And why do you think he was omitted by the rest of the group?
Patrick Moran here, host of Talking Buffalo, and I was asked the following question for this exercise. Ed Oliver was number 6 in our consensus list in 2022, yet not only did he fall out of the top 10 this year, but I was the only member of this entire panel that had him on my ballot. Why did I slot him in at number 7? And why do I think he was omitted by the rest of the group? Well, I slotted Ed Oliver in at number 7 this year. And by the way, I also had him at number 2 on last year's ballot because I think Oliver's play is absolutely critical to the Buffalo Bills and to the rest of the defense and how it performs. Look, when Ed Oliver is on top of his game, when he's playing at his peak, this defense for me hits another level. And when he's not, I think it affects everything in a negative way. I think personally that Ed Oliver is one of the most talented players on this roster, but I also think he is far, far too inconsistent. We saw a lot of that last year. Ed Oliver played great at times, and at times he disappeared, quite frankly, including the playoffs last year. So it's more important this year because Tremaine Edmonds is gone, and I'm not convinced that Jordan Phillips is ever going to stay healthy enough that even if Ed Oliver gets injured or slacks off, that Jordan Phillips can consistently pick up the slack. So that's why I think Ed Oliver is so important, and I'm talking about right now. And I think the reason why he was omitted by the rest of the group is because many feel that he's gone after this year. This is the last year of his contract, so maybe that negates his future. But you see, here's the thing. I don't believe that. This is a contract year for Ed Oliver. I think he's going to have his best season, man. I think he's going to ball out. I think he's going to play his butt off. And I don't think the Bills are eager to lose him. You lost Tremaine Edmonds last year, the anchor in the middle part of their defense, along with Ed Oliver. I don't think they want to lose both of them in consecutive years. So I think the opportunity is going to be there for Ed Oliver to stay with the Bills for a long, long time, provided, of course, he plays well this year, which, again, being in a contract year, I absolutely think that could be the case. You got defensive end to focus on next offseason, quite possibly safety position as well. So I think Ed Oliver is critical, not just for the present, but also potentially for the future of this organization as well. All right. Thank you very much. I'm Patrick Moran. Again, you can follow me on Twitter at Pat Moran Tweets and check out Talking Buffalo, available on all audio platforms as well as YouTube. Thanks a lot, guys. Take care.
Next up, we're going to hear from Anthony Marino. And my question for Anthony is, of course, about running backs. Anthony's the running back stan here on this panel. And so, Anthony, James Cook, he appeared on 3 ballots, including yours, but he didn't gain enough collective support to make the list. Tell us why James Cook should have been among the consensus top 10 most important players to the future of the Buffalo Bills.
So personally, I was shocked that James Cook only appeared on 3 ballots from the distinguished panel. I think when we talk about this and talk about what the Bills are looking to do at running back, it is no surprise that the team is looking to get their backs more involved. Sure, the signing of Damian Harris to a 1-year deal is one piece, but James Cook looks to be that top running back returning on the roster for the team this year. And is he going to be that 1A, I guess you could say, to 1B for Harris. You know, I think there has been such a devaluation of running back across the league, and that's fine. I understand some don't hold it in as high a regard as I do, but I think as we talk about this and what Cook can be, we've certainly seen some of those flashes of brilliance from him during his rookie season. Can he continue to grow there? But honestly, if he does not take that next step to, let's say, continue where he left off or to fill some of that void left by Devin Singletary, I don't know that the Bills have someone in their offense that can be that pass catching back. Sure, people might want to talk about Nyheim Hines and what he's done in the past. We have not seen that yet in his time with the Buffalo Bills. I see James Cook as being an incredibly important piece to this offense. And this is not someone that you can just, there's no one else on the roster that can replace what he does. So for him to take that next step, for the Buffalo Bills offense to continue to be one of the tops in the NFL, we already know they're playing a tougher schedule this year than they did last year. James Cook is going to certainly be imperative to that. And I'll say I'm surprised that he only appeared on 3 of the ballots. I know that Bruce Nolan definitely would not have included him on his, and we have some fun back and forth as it comes to the running back position. But James Cook and his success, whether it be as a runner or catching the ball out of the backfield, he is going to be an X factor for the Buffalo Bills offense this season, and I'm excited to see what he can do.
All right, up next is Bruce Nolan. And Bruce, Micah Hyde, Jordan Poyer, they were both included on your ballot. Now, Hyde only appeared on one other panel member's ballot, and nobody else had Jordan Poyer. In 3 years of doing this project, neither has ever made the consensus top 10. So why did you prioritize making space for both? And then how do you reconcile their yearly omission from the rest of the group?
This is Bruce Nolan, host of the Bruce Exclusive podcast on Buffalo Rumblings. I find myself completely unsurprised that Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer were both included on my ballot, but nobody else's. I prioritized making space for both of them because I saw what this defense looks like in 3rd and long in their absence. One of the significant differences between the Bills defense in 2022 and the Bills defenses previously in 2020, 2021, 2019 is that their effectiveness on 3rd and long was greatly, greatly diminished. The reason that is you didn't get the same level of safety play without Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer. And to this day, we still do not have on this roster a safety that I feel comfortable with right now, taking over the reins from Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde. And as such, they're going to end up being important to the future of the Buffalo Bills because the exercise is about what it looks like if they continue on their level of play versus if they don't. If they don't, whether they're not on this team or whether they become ineffective due to age, the impact on this team is notable. We saw what happened with an injured Poyer and an absent Hyde. I shudder to think what it looks like with an absent Poyer or an absent Hyde, or an ineffective Poyer and an ineffective Hyde. That bottom really, really matters. We saw a glimpse of it in 3rd and longs in 2022, and I have zero interest in seeing any more of it moving forward. I have no idea why they're consistently a yearly omission from the rest of the group, but I think it might be one of those things where don't it always seem to go that you don't know what you got till it's gone.
Up next, we have Z-Bot, and 2nd-round pick Osiris Torrence came pretty close to cracking the top 10, and Z-Bot was one of 3 panel members to slot him on their ballot. So tell us, why do you believe he deserved to be on the list?
There's nobody on earth who loves athletic specimens quite like Brandon Beane. And that's why I always refer to him as Professor X, because he's in charge of constantly building a team of mutants. And he added another one to the Bills roster in this past draft in the 2nd round by grabbing Osiris Torrence. For starters, I think it's pretty obvious. The Buffalo Bills offensive line was average to below average at best a season ago. The Buffalo Bills have one of the best quarterbacks on the entire planet. That goes without saying. Josh Allen is as good as it gets. He's the guy we've been waiting for forever. We have him. No need to worry about it. While all these other franchises are constantly trying to find a Josh Allen, the Buffalo Bills have Josh Allen. Once you have the guy, the next biggest key is protecting him. And I think over the last couple of seasons, Josh Allen has done a phenomenal job of overshadowing the flaws of this offensive line. One of the biggest points of emphasis this offseason by both Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane is protecting Josh Allen better. They're both fully aware that if they want to get the longest possible career out of Josh Allen, they cannot continue to have him get beat up on as much as he does. When you take a look at the Bills' offensive line depth chart as it stands, there's a lot of uncertainty. Outside of Dion Dawkins and then knowing Mitch Morse is, of course, getting older and his concussion history, not really much to rely upon at all when it comes to that offensive line. And I felt like it was inevitable the Bills were going to have to target that positional group in the draft. I couldn't have dreamt, however, that the Bills would wind up landing potentially the best guard in the entire draft in the second round. This guy is just an absolute beast. Thinking about what he could be if he hits his ceiling just gets me beyond stoked. At 6'5", 330 pounds, this is the guy that Brandon Beane handpicked to not only be the protector of Josh Allen today, but of course, for the foreseeable future. When making this list, I try to think of players that are going to be impacting the team in a major way right now and are going to be continuing to do so well down the line. I think Osiris Torrence fits both of those categories. Now, obviously, this is all hinging on potential. Osiris Torrence hasn't played a down of NFL football. But if you're going to take a swing in the draft to find a cornerstone for your offensive line, this is the guy you'd want. I can't imagine a more optimal situation than landing potentially the best offensive guard in the entire draft in round 2. I know I already said that earlier, but I still can't get over the fact that in round 1, the Bills were able to walk away with the best tight end in the draft, wait all the way till late round 2, and snag a guy like Osiris Torrence. To me, once again, this draft pick goes back to what Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott were saying all offseason. Protect Josh Allen. I know we're all obsessed with Josh Allen hurdling over guys, truck sticking guys. Nobody loves it more than me. It is the greatest thing on earth to watch. I do know, however, that reality sucks. And at some point, Josh Allen's not going to be able to do those things as consistently as he does now. And when that day comes, he's going to have guys in front of him to be able to protect him for the long haul. I think having a guy like Osiris Torrence, who's not only an athletic freak, but a guy that you drafted, a guy that's going to be in the building from day one to potentially the end of his career, a guy that is going to be around Josh Allen from his first NFL snap onward, that is going to be pivotal towards building up this offensive line to be in its best possible position to protect Josh Allen for the foreseeable future. The beauty of this draft pick and the reason I have him on this list is because I think Osiris Torrence comes into the team this year. He's an immediate impact on this offensive line. And I think with experience, he continues to grow his impact on this team. The current Buffalo Bills and the future of the Buffalo Bills need to be a lot better on the offensive line if they're going to want to continue to chase that Super Bowl ring. And I think drafting Osiris Torrence was an excellent start towards doing so. All right, that's it for me. But if you haven't had enough of this sexy, raspy voice, you can check me out on all the Buffalo Fanatics platforms, YouTube, podcast, you name it. I'm on it. And you can check me out on Twitter, where I spend way too much of my day. Twitter handle is @ZBotTweets.
What's up, Joe Miller? Your ballot was definitely the most unique compared to the consensus, but nothing stands out more than slotting Daquon Jones at number 5 on your ballot while nobody else had him ranked at all. So, Joe, tell us, why do you believe Daquon Jones deserves a spot in the consensus top 10?
Joe Miller from the Overreaction Sports Show, the John Fita Show, and the Hump Day Hotline and the Buffalo Rumblings Vidcast Network back with you to talk about the one guy that only I had on my ballot, that one guy being Daquon Jones. And the reason that I had Daquon Jones on my ballot, yes, Daquon is 31 years old. Daquon's got one more year left on his contract with the Buffalo Bills. But for me, this year is going to promote or bring about, I would think, a 2-year extension for Daquon. We know how much Sean McDermott loves that space eater in the middle, right? Daquon is the guy that we expected Star Lotulelei to be when he got to Buffalo. And we got 1 year of that kind of out of Star. And then obviously COVID happened. And then after COVID, Star was not the same player that he was. We know how much the Buffalo Bills believe in a player like that, in a position like that, in a role player like that. I believe they were paying Star $22 million when he was here now a year. Now, Daquon is not making that kind of money. I don't expect him to make that kind of money. But for Sean McDermott, who is now calling the plays and kind of the commander of this defense officially, for him to have that space eater guy, not only this year, but I expect, as I said, an extension, probably a 2-year, maybe a 3-year extension, depending on the money. For Sean McDermott to have that guy that's going to live in the middle of that defense on first, second down, rotational, eat up 2 blockers, to open up Von Miller, to open up Greg Rousseau, to open up Boogie Basham. To me, Daquon Jones is going to play over the next several years a very important role on this defense, a role that we know Sean McDermott wants, Sean McDermott needs, and Daquon Jones filled admirably in the 2022 season. And you need to look no further than when Daquon Jones was injured against the Cincinnati Bengals in that what the hell happened football game, in that playoff game against the Bengals. Daquon was not there, and the Bengals just gashed us left and right. His presence was missed. So for me, as much as Daquon only has 1 more year on his contract, an expected extension to him, for me, kind of shores up that position in the middle of the defense. So Daquon Jones came in for me as one of my top 10 most important Buffalo Bills players for future success for this football team. Once again, Joe Miller. You can find me on Twitter at Joe Miller Wired. Appreciate you guys. Joe Marino, love you, bro. But you already know that.
Up next, we have Anthony Prohaska. And Anthony, very simply put, when considering the results of this year's project and reviewing the ballots, what surprised you the most?
What's good, folks? I'm Anthony Prohaska from Cover One, host of Disguised Coverage and co-host of the Cover One Film Room, and I'm here to tell you what surprised me the most when considering the results of this year's project and reviewing the voting ballots. First, for me, is Matt Milano. I knew he'd make the consensus top 10 this year after not making it last year, but seeing him jump to number 3 after being unranked last year immediately caught my attention. And I wonder how much of it is due to his all-pro performance in 2022 versus the departure of Tremaine Edmunds. Obviously, I think it's a bit of both, but I wonder how it weighed out in the panel's minds. I had him 5th on my list last year, so I was definitely interested to see where he'd come in this year, and going unranked last year to number 3 this year definitely grabbed me. Also surprising me this year was how the panel viewed Von Miller in this exercise. He averaged out to 6th overall in the consensus, but several people didn't even include him in their top 10 at all. Several people had him top 3. Some within that had him top 2. He was kind of ranked all over the place across the panel, and maybe that's potentially an indicator of how people view his long-term versus short-term importance for this team, not only in 2023, but beyond. And for a guy who was the talk of the town last offseason, I thought it was interesting to see kind of all over the place where he was ranked. Lastly, Gabe Davis's absence from the top 10 didn't necessarily surprised me, but I thought it was interesting to see. I'm assuming it's a cocktail of his 2022 performance mixed with the belief that he doesn't re-sign in Buffalo for some, but he was the consensus number 7 overall last year, and he didn't make one panel member's top 10 list this year. And for a guy that could be option 2 or 3 in the pass game for 2023, seeing him not receive even one top 10 vote from the panel, that also caught my attention and surprised me a little bit overall. Again, I'm Anthony Prohaska. Find me on Twitter at pro__ant. That's pro2_ANT. My solo show, Disguised Coverage, is live on YouTube every Tuesday at 9 p.m. Eastern, and the Cover One Film Room is live on YouTube every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern, with both shows being available on all podcasting apps and platforms at the conclusion of the live show. Godspeed, and go Bills.
All right, last but not least, it's my guy Sterls. And Sterls, very simply, what are your most notable takeaways when considering the results of this year's project?
What's up, everyone? This is Sterls from the Intentional Grounding Podcast right here on the Buffalo Rumblings vidcast feed. And I'm back with another one. So Joe Marino posed a question, and it was, what are the most notable takeaways when considering the result of this project. And as I looked over the rankings, there's a couple things that really stand out to me. One is we're seeing, the Bills maybe pivot away from some of, guys that we would have thought in years past were some of the most important Bills, like Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde. Micah Hyde is probably up for an extension. So I would like to see that done. We saw Jordan Poyer get an extension this past offseason. But the prevailing thing on this list that really has me worried is that there are no interior defensive linemen on this list that made the ranking. We saw Ed Oliver make the ranking in last year, a few years ago. And now, it looks like he's been phased out and he probably won't be back in Buffalo. I feel like the defensive tackle position for this defense that puts so much emphasis on their front seven, I think it's important. And right now, we really don't have anybody coming back next year. Now, things can change. Trades can be made. Signings could be made. Draft picks can be, or resources could be allocated to the position. But I'm a firm believer that your front seven has to be strong. And defensive tackle is a major, major piece. Now, we saw the Bills go out and get Daquon Jones at Poona Ford, but I think they're veteran depth pieces. I mean, they're starter quality, but there's no long-term solution here. And that's kind of what I'm getting at. The second thing I would say, I would like to see my boy James Cook get in here. He got limited opportunity last year. And being a second-round pick, you want to see him. I would love to see him being talked about as one of the best backs in the league, right? But he's not there yet. And I hope that he can get there. And I hope, in years moving forward that he can at least crack the top 10. And then lastly, Dawson Knox. I think Dalton Kincaid really comes in, is gonna really eat up the market share for targets to the tight end position as a whole. Now, we know Brandon Beane views Dalton Kincaid as a weapon and a slot receiver versus a tight end, but you got to look at Dalton Kincaid as the next thing. The Bills really are high on him, but the Bills are also spending $14 million a season on Dawson Knox. So I hope that they can really use him in those 12 personnel packages moving forward, and that he can kind of start to make a name for himself a little bit more. I mean, we love him here, but those are my major takeaways on this project this year. And again, my name is Sterls. I'm a part of the Buffalo Rumblings vidcast feed, and you can catch my show Intentional Groundings at 9 p.m. Eastern time on Monday nights. Peace.
All right, folks, there you have it. The outstanding panel came together once again for some follow-up questions. I certainly hope you enjoyed this project. And, of course, the biggest of shout-outs possible to everyone who participated in this. I really appreciate them not only giving their time to submit a ballot, but turn around and produce a couple of videos so we can put this entire thing together. They make it. All I really do is put everything together. I'm just the host, and these guys really step up and contribute a lot here for us to have this really cool project. So a big thank you to all of the panel members. Now, look, tomorrow we're going to continue this conversation. I'm going to give you my thoughts. It's going to be my ballot. It's going to be where I'm surprised, where I think the biggest takeaways are, where I think we missed the mark. That's all coming your way tomorrow on the podcast. So don't miss it. Make sure you're subscribed. We'd love it if you took a second to rate, review, and share the podcast. Have a great rest of your day. Go Bills. And I look forward to catching up with you again tomorrow.